Yo, guys, it's Kyle coming at you from Bane's Film Reviews. Today, I'm sitting down with Greg Swinson, the writer and director, and Ryan Thiessen, the director of photography and editor of a fantastic film that I watched about a month ago called Hunt Her, Kill Her. It's a thrilling horror movie that I thought was fantastic, and I hope that everybody else gets the chance to watch as well. We get into that a little bit later, but for right now, guys, thank you so much for sitting down with me and spending some time. I really appreciate it. How we doing?
Good. Thank you for having us.
Of
Yeah.
course. Of course. So before we actually get into the film, I am curious how you guys got into filmmaking in the first place.
Okay. I'll start that one off.
All right.
Uh, I I've I made my first movie when I was maybe 10 years old.
Okay.
It was kind of a rip off of Rambo.
Okay.
Uh, and my much younger, well, not much younger, but 8-year old brother was the main character. And
Cool.
so it started there. Dad had to be the cameraman at that time because he didn't trust us with the camera. A few years later, we decided to make another one, and that's what really took off and really started enjoying it. And that I was old enough then I could use the camera myself. And then
Okay.
every weekend throughout the summer break, we were making movies. And um, about high school, we decided we were going to make before the Hollywood version came out, we were going to make a Mortal Kombat movie.
Okay.
So made the costumes. I had the story that pretty much followed the video game. We
Yeah.
didn't take any liberty there. We just kind of followed. Yeah, this guy fights this guy. And Ryan, who I knew through Boy Scouts, and another friend, they were kind of interested in helping, and Ryan came on, and he played Reptile and Raiden,
Okay.
and and I needed bodies, so I was like, sure. And then it kind of took off from there. His interest, which he can talk about a lot more, but and we just realized worked really well together. And
Hmm.
so building sets in my parents' garage and uh, shooting different stories.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
it started in high school, and then really Greg went on to film school, and then when he came back, I was still in college, and we really decided to get serious about it. So, is shortly after then I graduated. We tried to get multiple projects off the ground or whatever. We didn't really know what we were
Mm,
doing, and
right.
so that's when we eventually made Five Across the Eyes, just on our own shoestring budget, and then 15 years later, here we are.
Very, very cool. And then with that, how did you guys come up with the idea for Hunt Her, Kill Her? How did that movie end up happening?
Well, we had a project right before this that we were attempting that it was bigger.
Okay.
And things started falling apart with it, and it was also kind of one of those time crunch things where we got to kind of shoot it at this time,
Mm,
due to availability of certain actors, some sort of during I guess it was summer break,
okay.
because some of the people were in college and like theater students in college. So we only had a certain time, and then things started getting pushed back just with the things that happen in filmmaking. And so uh, we ended up scrapping that one for the time being,
Mm,
and then trying to come up with something that was a little smaller in scale, at least in
okay.
terms of what we were going to need, um, actor and cast wise. And
Okay.
so we had a factory that was in my family. And so we've known it for a long time. Ryan worked
Mm,
there briefly when he was in college. And so uh, we always said we had shot the little things there before with just some of our little
okay.
shorts and stuff. And so it was like, yeah, why don't we come up with something for this? And so um, we've always kind of been interested in sort of the home invasion kind of stories,
Okay.
just because there's a simplicity to them, but there's so much you could do with them, once
Sure.
you get them going. And so we kind of took sort of that idea and put it in a workplace.
Okay.
And um, so definitely we had the location, so we kind of wrote it around having this very cool location to use.
Awesome. And I actually had a question about the location. So, I mean, you film in one place the entire time, but you're always finding new areas of that place to film. It never feels like you run out of areas. It never feels like you're repeating the same thing over and over again, which I feel like shooting in the same place, that could be a possibility. And you do a good job of keeping it fresh throughout the entirety of the film. But at the same time, you retain this level of like claustrophobia, and you make people feel very confined and isolated. How do you balance that, and how do you achieve, one or both of those?
Uh, well, there's lots of nooks and crannies in there.
Mm,
And part of that was Ryan and I going through, even though we were very familiar with the location, still
right.
going through. And even before we kind of had the idea of the script, but before I was writing particular scenes, a lot of it was us going through, taking pictures, and there'd be like, oh, look, this little alleyway. Yeah, let's go. We got to shoot something through here. Yeah, we got to do
Mm,
something here. This is, and because a lot of the set was basically already there, it's just
yeah.
how it looks,
Right.
we didn't have to do a whole lot of set dressing with, usually it was just moving certain things, maybe with the logo or something out of the way.
Right.
But a lot of it was just us going in there and like, oh yeah, there's this. And then you kind of just like, you know, okay, I have this area, I have this area, I have this area, and then kind of I need this to happen. That would be better in this area. So like when
Yeah.
we shot, you know, we may wait shoots, she may come out of one little corridor, and that's on the very far end, and then the
Mm,
other down at the warehouse, and then she comes out in the rough mill. Those are the opposite ends of that factory. But
okay.
we kind of just oh yeah, we can do it here, we can do it there, and um,
Well, it's
so
it's
I think
it's pieced together very well. I never would have known that
yeah,
they were on complete opposite sides of the factory. So fantastic job of piecing that together and editing that so that it works out very well.
well,
Cool, thank you.
that's
Yeah,
Ryan.
Of
and
course.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's all starts with the planning but it was pretty interesting because the factory, it was, I don't know, 30, 40 years old now.
Mm,
And there, that one business had been in there for 30 or 40 years. And it started with like a small, much smaller factory, and they had built on another section over the years, and then another section, and then another section that expanded
okay.
this wing. And so there were actually sort of little mini locations that actually looked different within the factory itself.
Hmm.
So we tried to sort of utilize that as much as possible to make it look like, little mini locations within this big location.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and then really it was just sort of consistency in the lighting and yeah, the storytelling to try to stitch different parts together to get sort of the coolest little areas in a certain
Yeah. Yeah.
sequence.
No,
Yeah.
and then you mentioned the lighting, and so I mean the film is very dark. I mean tonally it's very dark, but physically it's very dark as well. And I imagine that comes with some challenges. Just trying to make it, just it's so it's possible for viewers to make out what's taking place. So, what are some of the challenges you face? What was the greatest challenge you faced, and how do you overcome those obstacles? Because it works very well. It works along with that, making people feel isolated and disconnected from everything else. And I think that's essential to making this film work. So, how do you overcome those things and make it work the way that it did?
Sure. So when the factory runs during the daytime, they actually have these big overhead lights that they turn on. So
Mm,
it's actually all lit up, and you can see. I mean, you can see end to end. It is a huge location,
mm,
but you can sort of see the layout from in each room. So the first thing we did, and well, sorry, and then so they have the overheads, and then there was sort of the secondary level of lighting over the workstations, and these are just
okay.
fluorescent lights. So first thing we did was turn off those overheads, and that immediately made the whole factory feel. And we kept on sort of the workstation lights for the most part. We'd sort of turn them on and off as needed, but that gave you sort of where you couldn't see now the far wall of the factory.
Okay.
It faded off into darkness, but you had
Mm,
pockets of light that created depth basically
mm,
inside of it. So, um, so that was sort of our base setting for it. Sort of like when you turn on the studio lights, that was our studio light setting.
okay.
Turn on all the work lights, turn off the overheads, and then from there we really just had a handful of sort of these Home Depot work lights, and we
Okay.
just sort of set those up to create the specific look we wanted around Karen or whatever needed to happen
Mm,
there. But so yeah, and we'd actually like take out sometimes like take the bulbs out of the fluorescent lights because you turn on like the whole bank of them, but you don't want these lights on over here. So
Sure.
we'd take those out and then forget to put them back in when we left that night. And it's a working factory. So the next day people come in and the lights are just kind of sitting off to the side, and they had to put them back in so they could go back to work. But, which we did quite a bit, actually. We'd sort of change stuff and then forget all the different, because we would jump around. So be like, oh crap, we forgot to put the lights back in the warehouse.
Yeah.
But they'll figure it out. But yeah, it was really, I mean, challenging wise, it was actually very controlled and really cool place to shoot, but really just sort of a lack of crew and stuff like that was really the biggest challenge. I ran the camera and, helped Greg co-direct, and we sort of served as producers and that kind of stuff. So
right.
The lighting wasn't, I mean, it's just really sort of the logistics of getting stuff set up that was sort of the most challenging part.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then that darkness ties into the suspense of the film. I mean, even from the opening moments, I mean, when Karen is talking at the very beginning, before anything really happens, there's this just very tense feeling that exists throughout. And a lot of that has to do with the lighting. A lot of it has to do with Natalie's performance. But so how do you achieve that level of suspense from the opening moments until the very end? It seems like it doesn't ever falter. So how do you achieve that from beginning to end?
I think it's just constantly having something new around the corner, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of tried with our hero to give her little mini goals. It's like, okay, ultimately I want to survive this night or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, now I've come across this locked door. How do I get through this? And so that becomes like a sequence, which then can give you all kinds of new ways to bring in suspense for that. And really you're just at a doorway, but it's chained, so she's trying to get through it. We hear people coming up, and then kind of change it a little bit, and now it's this location, and what can I do here? Okay, you're gonna have to crawl through this, you're gonna have to hang off this, whatever it is. It's a lot of just put them in kind of a room and say, okay, now what can we do here? And that's kind of it's kind of the way we kind of think. Pretty much a lot of our ideas come from that, but this was sort of like just a simple concept that you just kind of put the person in there with darkness, and there's something else in the room, and what can you do with it? And then
it's an interesting way to lay it out. It kind of reminds me somewhat of like an escape room, where I mean, if you just said find the key, this wouldn't be $1 million industry. You have all these layers to it, and you have it's a multi-step process. And I didn't really think of the film that way, but when you say that, it's absolutely true, and it does work, and that makes so much sense why it works as well as it does. And then so I mentioned Natalie, and it's there you go. Relax. I think the mailman came. But if you guys can still hear me over the ridiculousness that's happening.
Yes.
Yeah, we got you.
Stop. Thank you. So I've lost my train of thought. So with Natalie, so you have a unique situation here where she's not. Oh my God! Give me 1 second. I just want to deal with that real fast. I'm so sorry. Will you stop?
All right.
Will you please stop? Come on. Here, go to sleep. Ted, come here. Thank you. All right. So with Natalie, it's kind of a unique situation where she's not acting by herself, but you essentially have all these faceless individuals where you have no connection to them. You don't really know who they are. So she's effectively acting on her own throughout the entirety of the film, with the exception of the very beginning with the older gentleman and the very end with her daughter. I mean, she doesn't interact with a person, so to speak, even though there are these guys hunting her. So how do you go about casting someone knowing that they're effectively going to be acting by themselves? And then on the flip side, where you have these faceless individuals that still need to exude emotion, still need to add to the suspense, how do you go about casting them as well?
So with Natalie, that was actually, and when she read the script, um, she wasn't too concerned with like the more dramatic scenes toward the beginning, but she did, it was the action scenes, and then so much of sort of just her character being the focal point for so much of the movie. And then as we filmed it, she did mention quite a few times that, and she didn't anticipate having to act by herself, so much. And then when we did have the days where we brought, the guys in, especially when there were multiple guys kind of involved in a scene, so we had multiple people in with her. The energy just kind of changed, and she was like, "Oh yeah, this feels completely different now. I have people to play off of and stuff like that." So yeah, it was definitely a challenge for Natalie, and really, so the way we cast Natalie, she came from that previous project that we did right before this that sort of fell apart.
Okay.
She was involved. That's how we originally came across her. She auditioned for that, and we really like what she did for that. But since that project didn't work out, we called her when we had this one kind of ready to go, and she said she would definitely love to look at it and read for it. And so once she read for it, we knew she'd be great for the part, and so she was in. And then as far as casting the villains and stuff, that was actually pretty challenging since we did have such a extremely low budget. You'd think it would be easy to, just mask villains. That should be a no-brainer to cast. Anybody would love to do that, but that turns out to not necessarily be the case. We cast people and then actually had like no shows on the day that they were supposed to come film, because we weren't able to. One of the downsides to, of course, shooting with such a low budget is we weren't able to pay people up front, and so there is a back end percentage share and stuff like that built in, but really, without paying them cash up front, it's hard to. Some people aren't motivated to show up, evidently. So
sure.
So we had to scramble to sort of recast in the middle of after we had started shooting already for a couple of the characters. One was a friend of Natalie's that she recommended, and he read for it, and we're like, "Yep, all right, you're in. Cool. Let's go." And then he brought another friend that also had done some acting, and he read for the part. And we're like, "Okay, yep, you can do this one." So yeah, it was definitely challenging, and a lot more challenging than you'd think it would be for a mass villain. But the people we ended up with were really there for the long haul, and they were really great to work with, and it just sort of worked through everything with them. But it was definitely an interesting dynamic especially between Natalie acting by herself and then we actually had other people there. The energy just changed.
Yeah, I'm sure. And so going back to where like people don't show up to the set, what do you do? Like, does panic set in, or is there like do you have contingency plans, or what do you do with that when people don't show up?
Well, in one particular case, person didn't show up, and actually Greg wrote the script so that the villains were fully masked and fully clothed, and that was a huge asset for us. Mm-hmm. So we just stuck someone else in the costume for that day, so to speak. There was a bit of that going around, and we did have sort of stunt double type people for some of the more like the fight scenes and stuff like that. But a lot of them, I don't know, a lot of them, like JC did a lot of his own fighting and stuff like that. But if we only needed to pick up a shot here and there, we'd put someone else in the costume once in a while. So one of them actually there's a villain that, spoiler alert, just if you haven't seen the movie, skip this part. But the part where there's the guy's dead on the forklift, we had our associate producer Ed Bailey actually put on the costume for that because we didn't have the actor wasn't there that day to play that role, and really just sitting on the forklift. So but we shot the whole scene. Of course, there's activity all around that guy on the forklift, and then they start after Karen. Well, we shot all that stuff, and then sort of like, okay, cut, good, let's wrap this, pack everything up. And we started breaking down lights, breaking down equipment, and Ed, playing the guy on the forklift, was still just sitting there playing dead. And we were like, all right, Ed, we're ready, we're done. And they're like, crap, I think he fell asleep or something. And sure enough, we go over there, And I started like kind of his hands were taped to the steering wheel, so I just started cutting his hands off the steering wheel, and he's like, oh, sorry, I think I just fell asleep for a second. I'm like, yeah, I think okay, thanks. But yeah, it was so he actually just died during, fell asleep during that scene. It's pretty great, but
Method actor.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So you said spoiler alert, but so at the end, that reveal, I think subconsciously, a lot of people are sort of expecting that. I mean, Karen has a conversation earlier in the film where you're kind of pointing viewers in a specific direction, and I think a lot of people kind of anticipated that to happen that way, and I think that's good, but also you still retain a level of mystery throughout. I mean, you're constantly questioning, well, is it really this person? Is it who I think it is? So how do you go about constructing the script and then delivering and having it all play out, knowing that your viewers probably know what's coming next?
Yeah, so some of that was it's a very simple story. So it's obviously like once the villains show up, it's kind of like it's on. So
Yeah.
you can do all these different things. So it's kind of like, what can we have kind of, I guess, more of a reveal, a confirmation of what I think people are suspecting. There was a little bit more information that in the beginning of the script originally
Okay.
that kind of made it even more obvious. And we shot it, but we kind of cut it back later. It's like, well, let's just I think people kind of get it, but because it was never meant to be like a twist. We never thought of it in that way, but there was still some kind of a little bit of like the way it reveals itself that we didn't want it to seem like we were trying to twist.
Yeah.
We didn't build it that way, and then we didn't want it to, because as a twist, it would probably flop. It's like, yeah guys, we
That's
know.
fair.
So we kind of wanted it just to be, it's almost like I think she suspects it the whole time. But she doesn't have time to really like sit down and think about it, and deal with this. So it was more of giving just enough information that I think people are kind of like, well, this is the only information you've given us. So this information probably has to do with something later down the line.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, and so when it's finally revealed, it's more of like, yep, okay. We wanted to be kind of more like that and not so much like, haha,
right.
We fooled you, right? No. Oh.
Well, okay. And I think that development, I see it more as a development and a confirmation, but then it changes the dynamic of what happens there in the last act or so.
Yeah, for sure. And I had initially worded that as it being the twist, but then I thought back to it, and I it's like, I don't think they're trying to trick us. I think they're telling us what's happening, and they just want us to follow along. That's why I reworded it as reveal. So I'm glad that I wasn't completely wrong.
Yeah.
But then, so we talked a lot about this film, and I really, really enjoyed the film. I'm glad that I got my hands on it and I was able to watch, and I'd like other people to be able to watch and appreciate what you guys did as well. So can you guys share with me where everybody can watch this?
Sure. So we had a little limited theatrical run, which was absolutely amazing. We never imagined that this film would get any kind of theatrical run. So that was
that's
phenomenal.
So cool.
Yeah, unbelievable. But so the next time, but it's kind of done with that theatrical run. It'll come out on video on demand on April 14th. So
okay.
Next month, about this time next month. Well, a little less than a month. And then from there, they're talking maybe a Blu-ray DVD release later on. Cool. We'll see. But definitely video on demand is the next release, and that'll be, of course, anybody in the US can see it April 14th then. And they were working on, it'll come out in the UK and Germany for sure, and then they're working on some other international release days and stuff like that. But for the US, April 14th.
Oh, that's so cool. And so I'll make sure that I spread the word, because again, I want people to be able to watch this. Because I see a lot of independent movies, I don't always have the opportunity to share them with everyone. So I'm really glad that I had the opportunity with this one, and I'll make sure I share it as much as I can.
Cool.
And then, so Of course, you're more than welcome. And so, what are you guys working on now, if anything?
Well, got a couple irons in the fire. We definitely hope it won't be another 15 years before we do put out another movie. But
Yeah.
But yeah, nothing, no announcements forthcoming or ready to make just yet. But I'll say we got a couple things in development that we're really excited about, and hope we can put those into production very soon.
Awesome. Well, best of luck with those. If they make it, please let me know. I'd love to check them out and review them and do whatever I can to help promote them.
Yeah.
And then my final question for you guys, which always seems to be the most difficult question, what are some of your favorite films?
I'll let Greg take that one first while I think.
Okay, let me look at my shelf. Oh, I was just asked this question earlier this week, and unfortunately, they didn't like that I didn't have any horror films in there.
Okay.
Because like some of my favorite action movies was what I grew up on. So like the Rambo series, Terminator 2, Die Hard. Those are in my top 10, definitely.
Okay.
Then they have like the sleeper ones that you watched, and for some reason it just really meant something to you. Bottle Rocket from Wes Anderson's first movie.
Okay.
One of my favorites. Big with Tom Hanks and Pee-wee's Big Adventure are three of my kind of comedy movies that I just, for some reason, just love.
So interestingly enough, I do another segment on this podcast where I sit down with some friends of mine and we just talk about movies that we love, or I throw some their way that they've never seen and vice versa. And Pee-wee's Big Adventure was one that I had never seen. I actually just watched it for the first time on Monday, and you're going to be so disappointed. You're going to be so disappointed to know that I did not love it. But I feel like watching it for the first time at 32, it's not as good as if I had grown up with it. So
yes,
I appreciate that it has. I appreciate that it certainly has value, but it wasn't my cup of tea.
No, it's not everybody's cup.
Yeah.
It's a surprise pick when I mentioned that.
I was just talking to a colleague today who found out that I did love it, and every time he sees me down the hallway, I get a firm "fuck you" when I walk by. So, yeah, and Ryan, what about yours?
Well, I will throw a few horror movies in there. I love the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's like,
okay,
maybe my favorite horror movie of all time. I don't know. There's just something about it from beginning to end is just fantastic. And then, of course, I love Evil Dead 2, just the way that, genre, the horror comedy kind of centerpiece. Of course, Cemetery Man right here on the poster behind me.
All right.
One of my favorite films. It's just wacky, but awesome. But outside of horror, love Fight Club, love a lot of David Fincher films. He's a big inspiration. His style is a big inspiration for me.
Okay.
Old Boy, the Korean version, the original version, fantastic film, very disturbing. Love that kind of stuff. And then I just love really simple sort of survival type stuff like The Gray, great film. I mean, just really, really simple, straightforward survival style film. And of course, like The First Blood, stuff like that. But
very cool.
But yeah,
awesome.
a lot of old school stuff.
Yeah, but that's good. And I'm compiling a list of things that I haven't seen, which is a lot more than I care to admit. But I'm adding some of the movies that you guys just named to the list. So thank you for that. My wife will love that I'm going to make her watch more movies. Normally, I sit with a wall of DVDs behind us or behind me, and I haven't seen like half of them. We own them, and I haven't seen most of them. I mean, the majority, a lot of them, not the majority, a lot of them are like romantic comedies that Steph brought with her when we moved in together. So they're not on my list to watch anytime soon. But Ryan and Greg, I really appreciate your time, taking time out of your day to sit down with me and chat. I appreciate you sticking it out through the yapping dogs and not rolling your eyes and leaving me midway through. But again, thank you so much. Best of luck with the release, the virtual release, and then best of luck with everything else going forward.
Hey, thank you very much. Really appreciate you having us on the program.
You're very, very welcome. It was a blast.
All right.
Thanks. You guys have a great day. See ya.
All right, you too. See ya.